Hey, so in this short training video, I wanted to talk about why most people are stuck in their reaction to life and then how you can change it. So let's make it practical so you can really get out of this training video. So many people are stuck in their same habitual thinking pattern and then same emotional reaction when something happens in the outside. Something, we even use the term something trigger us, right? Now, trigger us means that you're deciding to see that the outside something, a person or circumstance, made you feel something. So the first step to recognize is that nobody or nothing in the outside actually is responsible for our feeling. Because let's imagine this, right? Let's put you and us and Dalai Lama side by side. Would Dalai Lama would have the same reaction as you or same habitual reactionary thinking pattern as you can easily imagine that that would not be the case. Now, that scenario and explanation itself can prove us that the root of the reaction is never in the outside. And an agreement that we want to make because we're engaging in this material, this kind of spiritual slash psychology slash consciousness type of work to be able to improve our life and better our life, right? So the first agreement that we need to have with ourselves is to decide that nothing in the outside is responsible for my feeling. Now, when I say that, the feedback that I get often is, well, what about this and this and this and this and this? That most people are deciding that something outside of them is making them feel something. So, and I'm gonna get into why people automatically and naturally assume that way, right? And then that tendency of deciding to choose to see so is making people trapped. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper than that. So, when you have, let's just imagine, right, without emotionally being involved with it, because I don't want you to feel trigger or having that same reaction emotionally as you go through this simulation. We're going to go sort of like a unemotional simulation. We're going to go through that. So imagine that moment and situation that you know that has become a pattern of reacting to life. There's a situation and circumstance for all of us, 3 or 4 different scenarios, right? That is reoccurring, that keeps coming up in our life, right? Now, when we recall that situation, right, now you have the visual of what you're seeing or auditory of what you're hearing, the five sensory 3D physical world. Now, notice that when you have, let's say your tendency to react is the reaction and the emotion that you want to change is frustration, right? Because I hear that very often. I'm frustrated, right? First of all, anger, frustration, any destructive emotion that creates that feeling, it's coming from your own internal fear. It has nothing to do with outside. The outside might reopen what's inside of you, right? But the cause of it is not in the outside, just like Dalai Lama would not be reacting the same way. So notice that when you recall that situation, yeah, what's your focus? Your arrow, the direction of the arrow is always pointing outside. This happened, right? This visual situation, something that somebody told you, or some situation that you witness, trigger your internal experience. And when you have that emotional, let's say frustration, your attention is in the outside. Yeah. And believe it or not, that is the reason that many people are stuck, right? Now, why are we paying attention to the outside when the cause of that reaction is not in the outside? That doesn't make sense, right? Because if you are, nobody wants to feel frustrated, nobody wants to feel negative emotions, right? Nobody wants to feel that destructive emotion and carrying that day after day, week after week. But the situation exists. So another agreement that we want to have is every situation in the outside event just is. And always the meaning that we attach to that situation creates positive polarity or negative polarity. Yeah. The thoughts and the meaning that we attach based on our belief, makes the situation positive or negative. The evaluation. The situation itself doesn't evaluate the situation. We who interpret the meaning evaluate to produce the emotion and the reaction that we have. So when we have the arrow pointing outside, what's happening is that because your focus attention is in the outside, what ends up happening in most people is that that frustration, emotion, reaction internally start owning their moment. Yeah, that is the best terminology that I can use. That emotion of frustration, or that emotion of whatever that you're experiencing, start owning you, means that you're not being able to control it. Yeah, and that is the reason that many people are stuck. And often when that sort of, because nobody wants to go into deliberately and purposely in a negative emotional state. So when something happens, it happens in life and we experience it, right? And we don't get to rehearse and practice when this comes next time, how can I shift, right? We're not trained to do, right? We don't study that in school. I don't think no family, have that ritual to educate their children. There's no school to study how to shift our emotional state, right? Now we have this emotional intelligence, and there are all kinds of different certification courses and all that, and we have a lot more resources out there. But in the general academic manner, we're not trained that, right? So then what happens is that you don't feel good, right? And then you might do a little meditation to feel that release. You might engage in walking in the nature, or dancing, or exercising. So you have this momentarily relief, but then when something similar happens next time, you react again. One, because many people, if not most people, are not aware that that feeling and emotion actually is arising from within, not coming from the outside. So therefore, the attention is in the outside. You focus on something that it appears to be negative for you in your perception, and then begin feeling and deciding to choose that this situation is making me feel this way, even though that is not at all the case. Yeah. So most people are focusing on the attention on the wrong place and try to fix the outside for me to feel differently. And then by now, I'm sure that most people have tried that and are aware that's not working, but nevertheless, they continue to focus on the outside. Yeah. Okay. So that is the reason why most people are stuck in the reaction to life. One, because the arrow is in the outside. And when the arrow is pointing the outside, they are being owned, their experience is being owned and hijacked by their emotional reaction. Okay, that's the phase one. The phase two of this video is, okay, then what do we need to do to bypass that or overcome this situation? First of all, to understand what I just shared. Yeah. And then what we want to do is, if the emotion or the reaction, frustration, that example we're talking about using right now, is coming from inside of me, but most of us are focusing on the outside. It's simple. What we wanna remove and eliminate is remove the visual, remove the auditory of the five sensory event circumstance, and learn to meet the feeling internally. Yeah. Now, this is a little tricky because most people are assuming that this situation is making me feel this way. So when they meet the feeling, they start focusing and thinking about the situation. But I'm saying that that is not the case. We want to deliberately remove that imagery and the concept of the circumstance. And whatever the situation, you might be hearing something, you might be feeling the touch, or you might be feeling some sort of five sensory information that you believe that trigger your feeling. You remove that external circumstance completely out of the equation, and you begin going to the feeling inside. Now, the moment you do that, now you're not being owned or absorbed by the emotion because you're observing it, right? One of the saying that I use often is if you're observing, you're not being absorbed by it. If you're not observing, you're being absorbed by it, right? Then when you are able to observe, the moment you're able to observe, you are cutting the code of being absorbed immediately. Then you can do something about it for the first time. Because now no longer your arrow is pointing outside, but your arrow is pointing within you. Does that make sense? That is an abstract awareness, skill set, capacity that we want to internally cultivate. But guess what? Most people are so dependent and focusing on the five sensory perception, where you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. So immediately you assume and attach the two together. I'm feeling this way because of this. That is not what's happening. The feeling is coming from inside, and the outside is creating some playing to activate that inside emotion and feeling. So detach the outside and meet the feeling inside. Now, just by doing that, your feeling start dissipating little by little by little. And here's the thing though, you don't need to try to analyze or understand what that feeling is. You don't need to try to analyze and understand what that feeling is. You just need to know some sort of something is inside of you and to breathe and sit with it. And with is the key term, right? You're not going inside, but you just sit with it. Yeah. And then whatever the perception that we're forming that chose to see the external circumstance is causing your internal experience. It's causing your thinking pattern to be activated. Now, the perception and the perspective that we form, that we see through the world, is based on the belief that we're holding on to. Now, once you're able to observe the feeling, you can evaluate the belief. What is the belief that you're holding onto that is leading you to create the feeling that you're forming from within? Because you cannot feel whatever you're feeling without having the belief that you're holding onto. Belief is a fundamental pull that causes us to feel what we're feeling, causes us to think the way we think, and causes us to create the filter of the perspective, how we see the world, therefore, how we experience things. So the three biggest beliefs is, what do you believe about yourself in the context of the world? What do you believe the world to be? Is it a fearful place? Is it a loving place? Is it a limited place with a lot of danger, or an unlimited expansive place that support you? Do you believe that the universe support you, or do you believe that things go wrong all the time? Because that has been the case. So seeing is not believing, seeing is not believing, believing is seeing, right? So it doesn't matter what happened in the past 5 minutes ago, or 2 days ago, or 10 years ago. If you use that information to interpret the world because you're believing based on what happened in the past, the seeing is, or seeing in the past is forming your belief. And guess what? If you believe, you will see it again. So it's a little chicken and egg, but it's important to be in the moment and choosing your belief to be able to think thoughts coming from the new belief, right? So the three biggest beliefs that we want to evaluate is, what do you believe about yourself in the world? Not just about yourself, but in the world. And what do you believe the world to be? What do you believe about life? That's the three fundamental belief that operates. And there's a lot of invisible agreement in the world that is unconsciously forming our subconscious belief. Oh, because this is the social norm, because this is the family tradition, because this is the culture, we do this, right? Because, we're supposed to go to school and then go to work, because after work, there's a retirement. All those are mental construct based on the five sensory environment. Yeah. But we don't need to believe based on what we are seeing in the outside. So coming back to this reaction to life, in order to evaluate the reaction, we want to meet with the feeling by removing the external circumstance. And then once you can write things down, or you can do some meditation of just meeting and sit with that feeling, and then begin evaluating that three fundamental belief and why, identifying little by little through exercise, writing exercise, why this feel, where this feeling is coming from, right? Now, sometimes or often people talk about past trauma. You don't need to analyze exactly the past trauma, but it's useful when you're able to identify that and be able to revise it. So the author of Power Awareness, Neville Goddard, talks about revising memory, right? Now, you have some sort of feeling that nested based on what happened in the past. Now, the inside experience is different from the outside event. So the inside experience in the past, let's say 10 years ago, was created based on your value system and belief. Now, because we are all a study and how do you call it, the junkie of studying our personal development, we are 10 years later, we are in a different awareness. But the memory that's nested in a subconscious mind, until we proactively engage back with that memory from a different lens, it will stay as a feeling based on the lens that we interpret 10 years ago, right? So it is useful to go back to the memory without becoming too emotionally involved with it, right? Because that changes your momentary frequency. But begin looking at that from a new perspective and awareness that you currently have 10 years later, and then you start changing, reframing the meaning of it. And another thing, though, not only the expansion of awareness, but another thing is because that has been nested since 10 years ago, as an example, and you might have experienced other stuff later, right? A lot of the pain or tragedy that we perceive to be happened in the past, there's always a gift in it. But the gift sometimes cannot be seen until later. Because when something happens very negatively as a perception, that might not lead to a gift and strength until the time path and that experience becomes a wisdom and to be able to contribute to help others, right? Unless the time goes by, we don't experience that meaning and the gift of the pain. So when we look back to sort of see and feel that emotion, and when we look at from the new awareness, two things happen. You are in a now new awareness, so you can attach a different meaning of it, but also you can attach a different meaning because you have hopefully turn that into a gift and use that experience based on the understanding and wisdom of that experience to be able to give to somebody else. It could be an empathy. It could be a deeper understanding of what people are going through because you know how painful it is. Those are all gifts, right? That we can experience only when the time goes by. So this training video, we're talking about why most people are stuck in the reaction to life. I think you got the answer. And how to change it by changing the arrow from outside in. How do you change the arrow? By removing the concept and auditory and by meeting the feeling. Once you met that feeling, you evaluate your belief. And once you evaluate your belief, you can do whatever you want to do. You can simulate to test out, to experience a different emotion or different internal environment through simulation, or you can go into a path that you think that initiated and caused that formation of the emotion, but looking at from a new perspective and look for the gift and the wisdom and begin looking at from a different point of view to attach a different meaning that gives you a sense of expansiveness, that gives you a sense of elevation. And we can choose to do that. So if you want to go deeper into how exactly you can do that, you're not sure, I think it's kind of clear, but sometimes people need guidance. Feel free to reach out to me and we will work on it. So let me know what kind of aha moment or realization you might be having through this, because I think it's very powerful if you implement and embody it. See you in the next video.